first time I am thinking clearly. You were right all along. I'm not a space ranger. I'm just a toy, a stupid, little, insignificant toy.
Whoa, hey, wait a minute. Being a toy is a lot better than being a space ranger.
Yeah, right.
No, it is. Look, over in that house is a kid who thinks you are the greatest, and it's not because you're a space ranger, pal. It's because you're a toy. You are his toy.
You are his toy.
I think it kind of goes without saying that if I say I'm someone between the age of 15 and 30, you could guess I have a deep emotional connection to the Toy Story franchise. I realise that's basically baiting my comment section to be filled with people saying, actually I've never seen a Toy Story film and I don't even know what one is. But you get my point. Even among Pixar's stellar track record, the Toy Story series is one that jumps out as having resonated with a lot of youngsters, and for good reason. It was a novel concept, a technological marvel, and with its colourful cast of endearing plaything characters, kids of all types would have something to identify with and pique their interest. Like if you're a cop, or a space cop, or a girl cop, or a sheep cop.
He is just like a cop.
So what I think most of all connects people to the franchise is its premise, one that seamlessly blends a fairly mundane reality with some highfalutin fantasy that digs deep into the classic well of what secret worlds might exist within our own everyday lives. And that, aside from the fact that they're just genuinely well-made films that mostly hold up on a rewatch, we'll get to that, is I think what's kept us drawn in for all these years. But uh-oh, my brand alarm is going off. Could this be an opportunity for me to read too deeply into the messaging of harmless kids movies? Sorry folks, the alarm says so. What's that alarm? A contractually obligated product plug? Well, I guess there's nothing I can do. But you can, by signing up to Skillshare. Hello once again. The lovely folks at Skillshare have again stepped in to help fund an episode, which is great because in return I get to give free stuff to my audience, like 2 months of an online learning tool used by thousands of creators across a variety of disciplines. What can you learn from this learning tool? Well, all sorts of stuff. With over 25,000 classes in subjects ranging from art, design, business and more, it's almost guaranteed that if you sign up, you'll find your niche. Want to learn how to take good close-up images of fruit? Tabitha Park has a class on it. But regardless of what you're looking to learn about, with premium memberships giving you unlimited access to classes and an annual subscription for less than $10 a month, Skillshare is a great place to start. And as per usual, the first 500 of my viewers that use the offer code down below get 2 free months of the service. It's a living. I'm going to assume most of you know basically how the Toy Story trilogy goes, but I gotta fill that watch time. So here's a quick rundown. Toy Story 1 is a story about a gang of sentient toys living in secret in the room of their child owner, Andy. The toys, led by horny cowboy Woody, live relatively harmoniously as the playthings of Andy, until the arrival of a brand new toy named Buzz Lightyear. Tensions rise as Woody, the top dog of the Andy's room hierarchy, senses a shift in the power dynamic, as soon Andy is treating Buzz as his new number one, and Woody nothing more than another toy for the box. And through a series of beefs and squabbles, Woody and Buzz wind up lost together on a quest to find their way home, each grappling not only with physical threats like the sadistic young Sid and his devilish dog Spike, but with their own hard-headed beliefs. And through all of this, they finally come to mutual understanding and an acceptance of the place they each have in Andy's heart. It's a classic tale of pride, hubris, the human condition. Yes, all of the human characters look like freaky doll people by today's standards, and yes, the exterior shots mostly look like test maps in a Half-Life 1 mod, but other than that, it's aged remarkably well. Pretty infamous now is the troubled production of the first Toy Story, which, as could be expected as Pixar's first major release, had that rocky period of trying to decide the exact tone and audience they wanted to go for. Whether they wanted to swing for the same sort of family-friendly cheese expected of a Disney-branded product, or something harder and edgier. And I think that concern really comes across here because I'd probably say it's the most balanced of the three in this way. It tackles adult themes of greater purpose in a meaningless existence while retaining that fantastical energy, and doesn't fall into the occasional mindless slapstick goofiness I kind of feel like 2 and 3 fall prey to. Not to say I think that's a bad thing, or, well, that's not why I don't like that direction as much, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The second movie was released a few years after the first, and wouldn't you know it, Andy is also a few years older. This movie begins with Woody accidentally getting broken, an incident which once again leads our cowboy into an existential crisis of what would become of him if Andy eventually got sick of him. As a result of this guilt, Woody makes the bold move to rescue some toys put out for a yard sale, and is there coincidentally spotted and taken by a maniacal toy collector named Al. Buzz and company go on a B-plot to find and rescue Woody, who meanwhile discovers a past life as the toy icon of the Jim Crow generation. They never explicitly call it that, but you can read between the lines.
Once the astronauts went up, children only wanted to play with space toys. Oh! Ooh! Take that, space toy! I've always hated those upstart space toys.
There he meets Jessie, the actual thematic centerpiece of the film, with her own tragic story of having exactly what Woody feared would happen to him, having happened to her. Forgotten and abandoned, all Jessie has left is her fellow collectibles, which leads to some conflict when Woody declares he's leaving to find his way back home. Al can't sell the toys without the complete set, giving Jessie the impression this is yet another broken family moment. In a moment of personal growth, Woody forgoes his own selfish desire to return to Andy to stay with his new family, reasoning pretty realistically that Andy losing interest in the toys is inevitable anyway. Nevertheless, when Buzz arrives and hears all this, he's unconvinced, seeing Woody as a traitor to Andy and leaving him to his fate. On hearing the classic "You've Got a Friend in Me" tune, Woody is reminded of what really matters: friends and family, which, technically speaking, Andy is neither. But nonetheless, Woody decides he's going back home and taking his new family with him. It turns out the prospector, the hapless old lad of the set, is none too happy with this. He doesn't want to be a kid's possession, which, as these films will remind us a few times, is the worst thing a toy can believe. Kidnapping Woody and Jessie to maintain the complete collectible set, Buzz and company rush to the airport to save them, and through a series of tense encounters, they do so. I guess Prospector's gonna have a lot of baggage to deal with after this one. It looks like the Prospector's torment is only in its infancy. I sure hope the Prospector likes commodification. When Andy returns home from cowboy camp, Americans, he finds his toys safe at home, ready for him, now with some new additions. For a long time, I definitely thought of this as a rare example of a sequel exceeding the expectations of the film that came before, and in many ways that's still the case. Animation's markedly improved, jokes are snappier than ever, and there's definitely a feeling of a grander scale here. But on a rewatch, you can sort of start to see the holes both in the presentation and the ideas of the text. In the first film, there's a clear sense that the core of this story is about anxiety over where you fit in the world, purpose and pride. Befitting that, the story centers specifically around the conflict between Woody and Buzz. Hence the decision to separate the duo from the rest of the toys 30 minutes into the film, to really dig deep into that conflict. By contrast, Toy Story 2 is more of a story about accepting loss and moving on from the past, the emotional high points all coming from Jessie and her own tragic backstory. This all fits in nicely with Woody's moving on from his glory days, and the Prospector's inability to do the same. But then there's the other half of the movie, which is pretty much just Buzz and the lads on a wacky adventure. There's a whole subplot with another Buzz and a Zurg, and it's like a Star Wars parody, and Barbie shows up at some point, and honestly a lot of it just feels like a distraction, albeit a fun one. Essentially the focal point of the story remains on Woody and Buzz, when thematically all signs should be pointing to Jessie as the focus here. And this ends up leaving its theme of abandonment and moving on feeling a little underdeveloped, Essentially Woody spending about 2 minutes saying, hey, I know you have PTSD from being trashed by your owner and that's sad and everything, but can you just subdue that trauma and trust me that this new kid will definitely not end up forgetting about you? And then she just goes along with him. It's actually way more conniving and frankly messed up because Woody's literally playing on her abandonment issues with her old owner.
Woody, I don't know,
Wouldn't you give anything just to have one more day with Emily?
Yeah, Jesse, don't you want to be reminded of that person you loved that trashed you on the side of the road? Don't you want to relive that experience? Maybe it's better that this segment went by too quickly to think much about. Well, don't worry, Jesse. I'm sure you can rely on Woody's word. Andy will never abandon you.
No.
We're being abandoned.
The third movie, set around a decade after the second, gives us a college-aged Andy, getting ready to head off and, in the process, leaving his old toys behind. Like hopeless addicts, the few remaining members of the Andy's Room gang lay crumpled in a dark box, wishing for years on end to be pulled out for just one last playtime. A playtime which sadly never comes. While Andy does decide to err towards nostalgia and keep them stowed away in the attic instead of giving them away entirely, a mix-up results in the toys being donated to a daycare center. Once there, they discover things aren't so bad after all, and under the watchful eye of de facto leader Lotso Hug Bear, the daycare could represent a fresh start where the toys can finally get some much needed playtime. In stark contrast to his position in the second movie, Woody is now the one who can't let go of Andy, and so he splits off from the rest of the group as they slowly realise things aren't quite as harmless as they seem. You see, the kids at this daycare centre play with the toys. Specifically, it turns out the infants in the playroom play a little rougher than their older counterparts, and the gang quickly change their mind about sticking around. Now, I don't know what kind of hellish daycare centre is letting small children run around screaming at each other, fucking around with glitter and paint unsupervised, and anywhere this would be standard procedure needs to be shut down ASAP. But I ain't here as an expert in early childhood development. I am an expert in overthinking movies intended for early developing children. Lotso is the Charles Manson of the daycare centre, shaming and coercing its members into line while using his hapless underlings to enact his twisted whims. When Buzz arrives to challenge him, asking if his friends be spared the rough room, Lotso forces surgery upon the naive spaceman, his vital organs treated as playthings, and before you know it, he's brainwashed like the rest of them. Woody, having been taken by a young girl named Bonnie, learns more about Lotso from the toys he soon meets. The bear a toy once filled with a pure and innocent love, corrupted by yet more abandonment, with a resultant grudge against the entire human race. Well, kind of. Let's talk about dystheistic pantheons. As my greatest rival Big Joel once put it,
like many Pixar movies, these are stories of anxiety about being replaced and forgotten. Every Toy Story movie deals with this fundamental thing, being scared that someday we won't be needed anymore, or something or someone else will come along that serves our purpose better. But I'm not Big Joel, I'm Jack Saint.
And while Toy Story is certainly a series about obsolescence and the anxiety surrounding it, they're also about something else. Dystheism, what did I say? As we make our way through this trilogy, we can see the natural conflicts and tensions between the toys as pivotal to these narratives. Challenged hierarchies, forged allegiances and betrayals, all that stuff. But though humans continue to serve larger and larger on-screen roles in the Toy Story franchise, what with them no longer looking like horrible cyborg goblins, their relationship between humans and toys goes relatively unquestioned. Even when a grudge against humans is pivotal to the characters, as seen in The Prospector and now here with Lotso, their vengeance isn't really inflicted onto them. If you remember back to that first movie, the third act conflict unites Woody and Buzz against a common enemy, the sadistic young neighbour of Andy's, Sid. Pretty memorable now is how exactly Sid gets warded off by the toys. While it seems like some kind of complicated plan at first, it's really just them deciding to break their unspoken rule about playing dead around humans, revealing themselves to freak the shit out of the kid for playing with toys he never knew were alive. And this isn't some Sid from Toy Story apologetics video. That dude stole most of his shit from his sister, and that's messed up. But Jesus Christ, is it really his fault he didn't know he was actually killing things when he blew up his toys, considering you know, they hide that they're alive? And the fact that these are even questions that come to mind is, I think, exactly why, ever since then, that kind of encounter has never really been addressed, even when it would make sense within the narrative. Buzz, in the first Toy Story, genuinely believes he's a space ranger, and has no awareness of a rule against engaging with humans, only playing dead like the others as a way of respecting the toy's customs, as he would any alien race. Based on the encounter with the second Buzz in Toy Story 2, it seems like Buzz being convinced of this delusion wasn't just a fluke, and yet these toys believing themselves to be more than just playthings doesn't become an issue again. And while the prospector's anguish is based around being left to rot in a dime store display for so many years, he never sees fit to just leave. Lotso Huggin' Bear is, literally speaking, still serving humans, despite his hatred of them explicitly being what fuels him. And you know what's being communicated here, folks? No? You even fucking... It's the Dystheistic Pantheon. It is now, I just made it up. If you're familiar with the notion of theism, boiled down simply as a belief in a god or gods, Dystheism is a variant relating to the idea that God is real, but they may not be good, and may even be evil by popular standards. And then the Pantheon is just that there's a bunch of different gods out there, like the Greek thing. Put them together, hey, it's a bunch of different gods, and none of them are perfect. I don't really know why nobody else has put those two words together. Probably it's a tautology or something. Why am I rambling on about morally flawed gods? Because, in the end, that's the closest parallel I could draw between how humans and toys interact in Toy Story. It's not like a master-slave thing, because the toys don't technically serve the humans, they just sort of passively exist to their whims. It's not like a neoliberal coerced partnership, because, again, toys as playthings is not something that's reasoned, it's just sort of a fact of their world. And well, at the end of the day, humans are literally the toy's creators. Looking at you, Toy Story 4. You can do the research yourself, but I have watched this trilogy back and forth more times than you could imagine, and the results are in. Toy Story is some VeggieTales biblical shit.
God, 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 God.
So where does that leave us, now that we understand the kind of religious undertones reinforced through this trilogy? Well, it certainly casts some doubt on a lot of the comforting assumptions we had about the movies up to this point, especially the first two. Now, when Buzz is sullenly admitting that without his identity as a space ranger, his existence is meaningless, Woody's retort that, of course his life has meaning, and he loves him, has an almost manipulative feeling to it. More than anything, this closer examination gives the scene the tone of a cult leader choosing a vulnerable moment to stoke a wayward follower's emotional dependence on God. His God. Why is it good that Andy loves Buzz, considering he doesn't actually know who he is? Why is it good that Buzz is his? Why is it in any way a good thing for Buzz to literally build his identity around his devotion to this one figure of worship? He has branded you. You are his now. Do you see what I mean when I say that once you've built this understanding of how these films establish the relationship between toys and people, a lot of these plot beats have a sort of culty vibe?
You are his toy.
Like, yes, on a surface level, Toy Story 1 is about Woody realizing he doesn't need to be Andy's number one. But it's also about stripping away Buzz's sense of personal identity to convince him that he's a toy just like everyone else, so as to make his identity reliant on the kid who happens to own him. And through the clear move by the creative team away from directly addressing the skewed relationship between owners and toys, it winds up feeling unexamined across the entire trilogy. In the second movie, Jessie is deeply scarred by traumatic experiences with her owner, clearly a result of how much of herself and her personal happiness she put into that ownership. Arguably the more healthy advice in her case would be find identity outside of being someone's plaything. But instead what Jessie gets is, hey, I promise it'll be different this time. Andy is a wise and loving god. And with an adult lens, you know it won't be that different. Toys are toys. Of course Andy will eventually lose interest, if not throw them away entirely. Woody saving Wheezy from the yard sale is like a cause for celebration in Toy Story 2. And then the dude just gets trashed off screen anyway in the third movie. Because of course he does. And it'll happen to you too, Jessie. Welcome to the family. And as expected, Toy Story 3 goes on with the toys finding their silver lining through getting a brand new owner. Thanks for donating a bunch of toys to some white picket fence middle class kid who already has a bunch of toys, Andy. You ever hear of underprivileged youth donation? Is this never challenged? Well, once again, we get Sid and we get the kids at the daycare, but the idea there is never should we be owned, it's who should be our owner. Pixar tells stories about accepting the things we can't change and not letting ourselves be held back by them, be it Up with Carl's dead wife or Finding Nemo with Nemo's disability. But the truth is, the toys of Toy Story don't need to accept a life where their happiness is contingent on the whims of their benevolent owner, even with the pseudo-religious overtones. Their whole playing dead thing is a choice, they've shown that. And the toys are capable of living independently of ownership. Until now, the closest thing to a character who recognizes this was Lotso, who realized toys were just seen as expendable commodities and almost kind of rebelled against it. Except for the part where he didn't really rebel, he just went to live at a daycare center. And that's all we got, a somewhat confused villain who winds up totally unredeemed because he refuses to admit a toy's rightful place is with an owner. Or, well, maybe that's all we got until now.
Who needs a kid's room when you can have all of this?
It may have seemed like I've been increasingly down on these movies, and maybe to some extent I am, because I do think in general with each entry they kept adding more and more goofy fluff that only made it harder to track the actual messages being conveyed. Toy Story 1 gave us Woody and Buzz having a frank argument in a parking lot about their different perspectives on life. Toy Story 3 we get Spanish Buzz trying to get his space rocks off with Jessie while Mr. Cucumber Head emerges from the shadows. And no, I'm not even beginning with the question of where the sentience of toys is stored if Mr. Potato Head can just transfer himself onto any object. Is it the eyes? Are there souls in their eyes? But the point is, all of this actually makes me pretty excited for Toy Story 4, which is at least leaning into the idea of maybe addressing the fact that emotional dependence on ownership has been both the cause of and solution to every problem in the franchise thus far. That maybe there could be life with meaning beyond worshipping your weird, indifferent god. Or, you know, maybe it would just be a goofy nostalgia fest with some forced emotional beats about how this might be the last time we see the toys again. Who knows? As it stands, yes, Toy Story does kind of have that assumed barely questioned hierarchy thing I kind of talked about in my Talking Dog video, among these other aspects. And to make it clear, just like I did in that video, yes, I know a lot of the things I'm talking about here were probably not intended by the creative team at Pixar. They just wanted to tell a fun fantasy story about the relationship between kids and their toys and show off some neat new technology. But I almost think that makes stuff like this more worth talking about, because it's often the things in media that go unexamined, deliberately or mistakenly, that can expose a lot about how we think and behave in a society. I don't know if John Lasseter or anyone else at Pixar was themselves religious. Randy Newman is actually an outspoken atheist, and he even did a song called He Gives Us All His Love that mocks the mindset of total religious devotion. Look, it's down here in the Wikipedia article for dystheism. Isn't that cool how it all links together? It almost makes it seem like I'd thought any of this through. And a part of me wonders if, with that attitude, Randy saw any of this coding in the text. But again, it doesn't really matter. Movie analysis isn't just about trying to dig into the heads of creators, even if sometimes parts of those movies can honestly be pretty revealing.
Are absolutely identical? You know, I'm sure I could get you a part in Toy Story 3.
Well, Well, I guess we cracked the case, huh? Toy Story's implicit thematic messaging turned out to be weird religious subtext all along. A job well done. But you know, something's still playing on my mind. I mean, the way these films are framed, the audience obviously isn't just supposed to identify with the toys. The kids are going to identify with the kids in the films too. Otherwise, what would be the purpose of tracking Andy's childhood so precisely with the audience up to this point? But what would Disney Pixar gain from leading kids to think of their relationships with their possessions this way? To make them believe there was some deep, significant, almost spiritual connection here? To put such stock on ownership of a commodity, specifically no less? To make this some kind of divine pact? To make children feel like some kind of greater power simply by how many figures they... Wait a second! Old man capitalism! It was you! All along! Hey there folks, frankly that was complete gibberish. If you claim you got anything out of that, you're lying. Anyway, thanks for watching. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments down below, or over on my Twitter, which you can see on screen now. If you enjoyed this, you can also consider throwing me a buck or two over on Patreon, or coffee for one-time donations, since that's how I keep the show going. Any tier gets you access to my Patreon blog, and more than $5 gets you on the credits scrolling by now. Extra donation gets your name listed out like these folks here: Astral Vagabond, Evie Rosk, Torin the Exile, with an extra special thanks to Kara Ra and Pamphleteer. I also have a Twitch stream I'm trying to do somewhat regularly where everyone's welcome to come over and chat. I'd like to also give one final huge thanks to Skillshare for the sponsorship on this one. Once again, you can use that offer code for 2 free months of the service. Other than that, have a great weekend, love you all, and stay safe.